I never thought I'd be the kind of guy writing one of these posts, but here I am. My name's Oscar. I'm 32. And if you had told me 2 months ago that my marriage, something I genuinely believed was built on loyalty and trust, would unravel in a single afternoon, I would have laughed in your face. I'm not some hot-headed type who looks for drama. I'm the quiet one, the peacemaker. The kind of man who works long hours, brings home flowers every now and then, and tries to avoid unnecessary arguments. My wife, Megan, used to joke that I was too calm for my own good. I used to think that was a compliment. Now I'm not so sure. Megan and I had been together for almost 8 years, married for 5. We met through mutual friends at a barbecue, back when we were both struggling 20-somethings trying to figure life out. She had this energy about her, this way of making every room feel lighter. I was drawn to her instantly, like most people were. She talked a lot, laughed loudly, and always seemed to know what to say. I was quieter, more of a listener than a talker, and she liked that about me. Said I grounded her. But over the years, that same quietness started to bother her. I could feel the shift, little remarks like, "You never get mad about anything," or "Do you even care enough to fight for us?" It confused me, because I did care. I just thought being calm was my way of showing love, not indifference. We lived in a small suburban neighborhood, not too fancy, but comfortable enough. I worked in IT, mostly from home, and Megan worked part-time at her sister's boutique. Her family was complicated. That's the nicest way I can put it. Her mom, Lorraine, was the kind of woman who could make you feel 2 inches tall with just a smile. Always meddling, always just asking questions. And her younger sister, Paige, followed right in her footsteps, entitled, smug, and very aware that she was Lorraine's favorite. I tried to stay civil with them, but from the start, they made it clear they didn't think I was good enough for Megan. They'd make snide comments about my job, or about how Megan could have done better. Megan used to brush it off, saying that was just how her family was. But the more I saw of them, the more I realized just how they were disrespectful without consequences. The first hint that something was really wrong came on a Thursday afternoon. One of those gray, nothing special days that ends up changing your entire life. I was in my home office, finishing up a report when Megan's phone buzzed on the counter behind me. Normally, I wouldn't think twice about it, but it buzzed again. And again. 5, 6 times in a row. Rapid fire. Out of habit, I glanced over and saw the name flash across the screen, Paige. Now, that wasn't strange on its own. They were close, but the message preview caught my eye. It said, "Did you tell him yet?" followed by another. "He's going to find out eventually." That sent a chill straight through me. I didn't touch her phone, but the curiosity and dread that washed over me were instant. My stomach knotted. Megan came home about 20 minutes later, humming like everything was normal. She walked into the kitchen, kissed me on the cheek, and started talking about dinner plans. I tried to act casual, but I couldn't stop thinking about those messages. So, after a few minutes, I asked, "Hey, what did Paige want? She's been blowing up your phone all afternoon." The way she froze told me everything I needed to know. It was just half a second, a flicker, but it was enough. She quickly forced a smile and said, "Oh, it's nothing." She's being dramatic again. But her tone was tight, her voice higher than usual. I didn't push it right away. I just nodded and let her talk. Still, something inside me had shifted. That small moment of hesitation didn't feel like nothing. It felt like a wall between us had cracked, and whatever was behind it was about to come crashing through. Over the next few days, she acted weird. Defensive. Short-tempered. She'd get irritated if I asked where she was going or when she'd be back, even though I'd never been the controlling type. "I don't need to check in with you every second." She snapped one evening when I simply asked if she wanted to have dinner together. I didn't even argue. I just said, "All right," and went back to what I was doing. But that seemed to make her angrier, like my calmness was the problem again. Then came the weekend. Her family invited us over for what they called a casual dinner. I almost didn't go, but Megan insisted, said it would mean a lot to her mom. I went, though I already knew it would be another evening of backhanded compliments and passive-aggressive jokes. And sure enough, Lorraine didn't disappoint. As soon as we sat down, she looked at me and said, "Still working from home, Oscar? Must be nice to do nothing all day." Paige laughed so hard she nearly spilled her wine. Megan didn't defend me. She just looked down and pretended to be busy with her plate. That's when I noticed something else. Paige kept glancing at Megan with this smug little smirk, like they shared some secret joke I wasn't in on. I caught it more than once. And every time, Megan's face tightened a little more. My instincts were screaming that something wasn't right, but I stayed quiet. I've always believed that people reveal themselves if you just give them enough space. And that night, I was right. When we got home, Megan went straight to shower. While she was in the bathroom, her phone buzzed again on the nightstand. I didn't want to look, but I couldn't stop myself. It was Paige again. You can't keep this up much longer. He's not stupid. My heart started pounding. I sat there staring at the screen, torn between confronting her and waiting to see what she'd do next. I didn't want to jump to conclusions. But something inside me, the same gut feeling that made me check the phone in the first place, told me I was about to uncover something I'd never be able to unsee. The next morning, Megan left early, saying she had to help her mom with something at the boutique. But I couldn't shake the feeling that she was lying. I waited about 20 minutes, then got in my car and drove toward the shop. I parked across the street, just far enough to see without being noticed. After about 10 minutes, I saw her car pull in, but she didn't go inside. She stayed parked. Then another car, a black SUV I didn't recognize, pulled up beside hers. My chest tightened as a man got out. I couldn't see much from where I was, but I saw her step out too, smiling, her body language instantly different. Open. Familiar. She touched his arm, laughed, and leaned in. That was all I needed to see. I didn't storm over or make a scene. I just sat there, hands gripping the steering wheel, every emotion imaginable fighting inside me. Anger, heartbreak, disbelief. But under all that, something colder settled in, a strange, quiet resolve. I watched them for a few more seconds, then started the car and drove home. That evening, when she walked through the door, she acted like nothing happened. She kissed me on the cheek, asked about dinner, and started scrolling on her phone. My pulse was hammering, but I kept my voice steady when I said, "How was your day at the boutique?" She froze, just for a second, like before. Then she smiled and said, "Fine. Busy." I looked at her for a long moment and said, "You sure that's where you were?" That's when it happened, the moment that shattered any illusion I had left. She laughed, not nervously, not guiltily. She laughed like it was a joke. Then she looked me straight in the eye and said, "You're not going anywhere, Oscar. Don't be dramatic." Something in me snapped, but not in the way she expected. I didn't yell. I didn't accuse. I didn't even ask for an explanation. I just stood up, walked to our bedroom, and pulled out a suitcase. The sound of the zipper made her stop laughing. "What are you doing?" she asked, half amused, half wary. I didn't answer. I started folding my things, shirts, jeans, the essentials, and placing them neatly in the suitcase. But when I opened the drawer and pulled out the small black envelope I'd been hiding for months, her face changed completely. The color drained from her cheeks. That envelope contained something she never thought I'd know about, something she'd worked hard to keep hidden. And when she saw me place it carefully in the suitcase, her laughter died instantly. That was the moment she realized the game was over. When Megan's face drained of color, I knew I'd hit something raw. She tried to play it off at first, brushing her hair back like she hadn't just gone pale as a ghost. "What's that?" she asked, pretending to sound curious, but her voice had that edge to it, the one people get when they're terrified of the answer. I didn't say anything. I just placed the black envelope on the bed and zipped up half the suitcase. My silence seemed to get under her skin more than shouting ever could. She started pacing, arms crossed, voice rising with every word. "Oscar, seriously, what are you doing? You're overreacting. You always take things too far." That line hit me like déjà vu, because it wasn't the first time she'd said it. Every time I caught her lying or noticed something off, that was her go-to. "You're overreacting." It was her shield, her way to twist the situation so I'd start questioning myself instead of her. But not this time. When I finally spoke, my voice came out calm. Too calm. "You might want to stop pretending," I said quietly. "You know what this is." Her eyes flicked toward the envelope again, and I could see her thinking, calculating, trying to figure out how much I actually knew. "Oscar," she said, her tone softening in that fake, manipulative way she always used when she wanted control back. "I don't know what you think you found, but you're making a mistake. Please, just, let's talk about this." I picked up the envelope, tapped it against my hand once, and said, "Talk about what? The secret account? Or the man you were with today?" Her mask cracked. just for a heartbeat. Then, unbelievably, she tried to laugh again. Are you serious? You followed me. That's insane, Oscar. I was meeting a supplier for the boutique. I tilted my head. He looked like a supplier. Her eyes darted away. She was trapped, and she knew it. The silence between us stretched long enough that I could hear the ticking clock in the hallway. Finally, she sat down on the edge of the bed and muttered, "You weren't supposed to find out like this." There it was. The truth, quiet, reluctant, and ugly. She didn't cry. She didn't apologize. Instead, she started explaining like it was some sort of business transaction, like I was just another item on a list she had to deal with. She told me she'd met him, Ethan, apparently, months ago. He was a client at the boutique who understood her and listened when I didn't. I stood there, expressionless, letting her talk. Every word out of her mouth felt like a knife, but I didn't stop her. I wanted to hear it all. When she finally ran out of excuses, I asked one question. Was this your plan? To use my money to fund your new life with him? That's when she snapped, her calm mask shattering completely. My money too, Oscar. You act like you're the only one who's worked for anything in this marriage. I've supported you for years. I blinked at her. You mean emotionally? Because financially. I gestured to the envelope. This proves otherwise. Her expression turned venomous. You had no right to go through my things. That almost made me laugh. She'd just admitted to an affair and financial deceit, and her biggest concern was that I'd invaded her privacy. That told me everything I needed to know about what she really valued. I didn't respond. I simply walked out of the room, needing air, needing space. But as I stepped into the hallway, I caught a glimpse of the wedding photo hanging near the door, the one where she was smiling so brightly I thought it could light up the world. Looking at it now, all I could see was the manipulation behind that smile, the ease with which she'd convinced me everything was fine. I spent that night at a motel. I didn't text or call. She didn't either. I think we both knew what that silence meant. But the next morning, when I drove back to grab a few more things, her car wasn't in the driveway. The house was quiet. Too quiet. When I walked inside, I noticed something right away. The envelope was gone. That black envelope had contained all the evidence: bank statements, messages, copies of transfers she made from our joint account to one with her name only. I had discovered it weeks ago while organizing our tax records, but I hadn't confronted her then. I wanted to see if she'd come clean. Now, she had not only confirmed everything, but also taken the proof. For the first time in years, I felt genuine anger rise in my chest. Not the kind that makes you yell, but the kind that burns slow and steady, like a fuse. I knew what she was doing. She thought she could erase it all, gaslight me into submission again. Over the next week, Megan's mask began to crumble completely. She moved out temporarily, claiming she needed space, but still showed up uninvited to the house, demanding access to certain things: her furniture, her jewelry, even her car, which, by the way, was under my name. I didn't stop her right away. I let her take what she wanted while I took notes, literal notes, documenting everything she said and did. Because by that point, I wasn't just reacting anymore. I was planning. The tension between us grew sharper with every encounter. Her family got involved, of course. Lorraine called me one evening, pretending to be concerned. She said Megan was confused and that I shouldn't make rash decisions. Then, within 2 minutes, she started guilt-tripping me. You know, Oscar, Megan gave up a lot to be with you. She could have married someone with real prospects, but she chose love. Don't throw that away because of a little mistake. A little mistake. That's what she called it. I almost hung up, but then Lorraine said something that made everything click. You've always been too sensitive, Oscar. That's why Megan felt like she couldn't be honest with you. It wasn't just Megan. Her entire family had this twisted way of flipping reality to protect themselves. If they hurt you, it was because you misunderstood. If they betrayed you, it was because you overreacted. And if you stood up for yourself, you were the villain. Over the next few days, Megan and Lorraine began working together. I'd hear whispers in town, people saying things like, "Poor Megan, I heard Oscar just left her out of nowhere." They were rewriting the story, painting her as the victim and me as the cold, distant husband. Even Paige got involved, posting cryptic quotes on social media about narcissists and toxic partners. The irony was almost laughable. Still, I stayed quiet. Because I knew something they didn't. I had backup copies of everything. The statements, the messages, even screenshots of Megan's texts to Ethan that I'd managed to retrieve from our cloud account before she wiped her phone. I didn't want revenge, at least not yet. I wanted the truth out there, but I also wanted it to hurt when it came out. The real breaking point came 2 weeks later. Megan showed up at the house again, this time with Lorraine and Paige in tow. I was sitting in the living room when I heard the door open. Lorraine's voice carried through the hall before I even saw her. "Oscar, we need to talk." I stayed seated. "About what?" Megan appeared behind her, arms crossed, eyes narrowed like she was walking into battle. "About you trying to ruin my life," she said. I frowned. "I think you managed that on your own." Lorraine's eyes widened in feigned shock. "How dare you talk to my daughter like that? After everything she's done for you." Paige chimed in from behind. "Wow, no wonder she cheated. Look at you, still playing the victim." That was the first time anyone had said it out loud. Cheated. The word hung in the air, heavy and real. Lorraine glared at Paige for saying it so bluntly, but it was too late. I turned to Megan and said, "So that's the story now? You cheat, you lie, you drain our account, and somehow I'm the bad guy." Lorraine stepped forward, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "Oscar, dear, you've always had trouble handling conflict. Maybe if you were more attentive, Megan wouldn't have felt neglected." That was it. The moment something inside me finally broke. All those years of being dismissed, disrespected, talked over, it all came crashing down. I stood up slowly, my hands steady. "You know what's funny, Lorraine? You raised her to think she could do whatever she wanted and never face consequences. You taught her that manipulating people is easier than telling the truth. And now you're shocked she ended up exactly like you." Lorraine's face twisted, Megan's jaw dropped, and Paige let out a nervous laugh. "You don't know what you're talking about," Megan snapped. "You've been obsessed with controlling everything." I stepped closer, my voice low. "The only thing I've been obsessed with is keeping this family together while you were busy destroying it." The room went dead silent. Lorraine opened her mouth to speak, but I was done. I turned, walked to the bedroom, and pulled out the suitcase I'd packed days ago, the same one that had started all this. When I came back, I placed it by the front door and said, "You want the house? Take it. But before you do, you should check your email." Megan frowned. "What?" "Just do it," I said quietly. She hesitated, then pulled out her phone. As soon as she opened her inbox, I saw her face drain of color again, just like before. I'd sent the files. Every last piece of evidence. Not to her. To someone else. Someone she never expected. Her voice trembled as she whispered, "You didn't." After I hit send on that email, the house felt heavier than ever. The silence that followed wasn't the quiet of peace. It was the thick, suffocating stillness that comes when everything you thought you knew shatters. Megan didn't speak for what felt like an eternity. Lorraine hovered in the background, her posture rigid, like she was trying to make herself look taller, more intimidating, but it didn't work. Paige stood there too, phone clutched in her hand, probably realizing the chain reaction that email would start. I left the room slowly, walked to the kitchen, poured myself a glass of water, and just stared out the window. I didn't cry, didn't scream. I just let it settle. Because in that silence, in that stillness, I realized something I hadn't allowed myself to feel in years. I was free. Not free in the romantic, fairy tale sense. I wasn't suddenly happy, and I certainly wasn't healed, but free from the constant manipulation, the gaslighting, the daily emotional erosion that comes from living with someone who sees you as a tool to be used. That night, I didn't sleep well, but I didn't leave either. I stayed on the couch, replaying everything in my head, making lists, strategizing. Megan had always tried to control the narrative, and now it was my turn. I started thinking about the life I wanted, not the one she had tried to trap me in, the one her family had tried to dictate, but the one I actually wanted. It wasn't going to be easy. Nothing ever worth doing is. But I felt, for the first time in years, that I could actually do it. Over the next few days, the fallout began. Megan tried calling, texting, showing up at the house again, but I was careful. I didn't respond right away. I let her panic simmer. And it worked. The email I had sent, to a select few people who had influence, who could verify the truth, began to circulate quietly. The people who mattered started to see the real story. Megan's betrayal, the financial deceit, the manipulation. Lorraine tried to call me again, but this time I didn't answer. Paige posted another cryptic quote online, but I simply blocked her. I realized quickly that the only way to regain control of my life was to cut them out, at least temporarily, and focus entirely on myself. The first step was reclaiming my space. I changed the locks, set up new security measures, and began clearing the house of anything that reminded me of her. It wasn't about spite, it was about survival. Each box I packed, each item I donated or sold, felt like a tiny reclaiming of autonomy. I found a kind of strange satisfaction in it. Like the physical act of removing her belongings was also removing the emotional weight she had left behind. I also took stock of my finances. Megan had assumed she could manipulate the joint account without consequences, but I was meticulous. I reviewed every transaction, made sure nothing was missing, and began separating my assets so she couldn't touch them again. It was boring, tedious work, but it was empowering. For the first time, I felt competent in the way she had always tried to convince me I wasn't. Around that same time, I leaned heavily on my friends, real friends, not people trying to profit from drama or take sides superficially. They were a lifeline. I don't think I had realized how isolated I'd become during the years of subtle manipulation. Megan and her family had built this small ecosystem around themselves where I was quietly blamed for everything that went wrong. Talking to people who saw me for who I really was, flawed, yes, but honest and capable, was like breathing fresh air for the first time in a long while. Then came the work. My IT job, which I had previously taken for granted, became a sanctuary. I started taking on more challenging projects, ones I'd previously avoided because I didn't feel confident enough or because Megan had subtly undermined my abilities. Now, every task completed, every problem solved, every client compliment I received felt like a personal victory. Slowly, steadily, I rebuilt my self-worth. I began keeping a journal, something I'd neglected for years, and it became a mirror showing me how far I'd come in a matter of weeks. One afternoon, about a month after everything came to light, I got a call from someone I hadn't spoken to in years, an old colleague who had moved into management at a larger tech firm. They'd heard about my expertise and wanted to see if I was interested in a leadership role on a new project. Normally, I might have hesitated, worried about overcommitting or failing. But now, I said yes almost immediately. I realized that I'd spent so much time shrinking myself, bending to the will of someone else, that I had forgotten what it felt like to reach for something bigger. The new role was intense. It demanded long hours, problem-solving under pressure, and constant collaboration with people who didn't know me personally. I thrived. Every successful deployment, every compliment from my team, every solved crisis reminded me that I wasn't defined by Megan or her toxic family. I had skills, judgment, and resilience. I had value. Meanwhile, Megan's world began to unravel quietly but visibly. The email I'd sent had reached a few of her boutique clients and former business contacts. Discreetly, they started asking questions, subtly withdrawing support. The boutique struggled to maintain its image. Lorraine tried to step in, but her interference only highlighted the chaos. Paige, as usual, reacted by posting defensive, inflammatory comments online, but no one took them seriously. Slowly, the web of deceit they had built around themselves began to collapse. Not dramatically, not in a single explosive moment, but quietly, efficiently, in ways they couldn't control. Emotionally, I felt a strange mix of relief and emptiness. I was free from manipulation, yes, but the betrayal cut deep. I had loved someone, trusted someone, and been lied to on multiple levels. It was hard not to dwell on that. Some nights, I'd sit in the quiet of the apartment I'd moved into temporarily, staring at the ceiling, replaying moments in my head, asking myself if I could have seen it sooner, if I could have stopped it. But then I'd remind myself, I couldn't control her choices. I could only control my response. And my response was building a life I actually wanted. I started exercising again, something I'd let slide during the stressful months of tension and gaslighting. I ran in the mornings, lifted weights, and even joined a small boxing class. The physical exertion helped release the anger that otherwise would have festered. I began cooking my own meals, focusing on nutrition rather than convenience. Slowly, I rebuilt not just my life, but my sense of self, my confidence, my independence. Around this time, I also reconnected with old hobbies I'd neglected, photography, reading, even some amateur coding projects that had nothing to do with work. Each project, each photograph, Each line of code was a small reminder that my life could be mine, fully and unapologetically. I felt more like myself than I had in years. Then, one evening, about 6 weeks after the initial confrontation, I got an unexpected visitor, one of Megan's former boutique clients. She came to my door, looking nervous but resolute. "Oscar," she said, glancing past me into the apartment, "I think you need to know, she's not who she says she is. I saw some things, and I thought you should know before it's too late." Her words hit me with a mix of vindication and dread. This wasn't the first time someone had come forward quietly, but it felt different hearing it directly. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about justice, about righting the imbalance that had existed for too long. I invited her in, and over the next hour, she laid out pieces of the puzzle I hadn't yet seen. Financial mismanagement, lies to clients, manipulations behind the scenes, and subtle coercions that had kept people silent. I listened carefully, taking notes. By the end of the conversation, I realized two things. First, that Megan's deception had been far wider than even I knew. And second, that I now had the power to make real, lasting change, not just for me, but for anyone else caught in her web of manipulation. That night, as I walked home from the coffee shop where we'd met, I felt a strange clarity. I wasn't angry in the frantic, burning way anymore. I was focused, deliberate, steady. Every betrayal, every lie, every slight had been accounted for, mentally filed, and now could be used strategically if necessary. I had no desire for petty revenge. I wanted control, precision, fairness. I wanted Megan and her family to realize, finally, that the man they had tried to break could not be broken. And in that moment, I understood something crucial. True strength isn't loud. It isn't vengeful. It's quiet, relentless, and built from the rubble of everything that tried to destroy you. Megan and her family had underestimated me for years. They had assumed that my quiet nature meant weakness, that my calm demeanor meant passivity. I let them believe that. I let them slip, and now, quietly, deliberately, I was setting things into motion that they would never see coming. The first step was information. I couldn't act on assumptions or half-truths. I had already collected evidence about Megan's infidelity, her financial manipulations, and her lies to everyone around her, but I needed more. I began researching everything I could about her boutique operations, the people she interacted with regularly, and even her extended circle of acquaintances. I spoke carefully with people who knew her, people who had been burned or subtly manipulated by her over the years, and I listened. I didn't ask for allegiance yet. I didn't reveal anything about my intentions. I simply gathered, filed, and organized. Knowledge was my currency now. Meanwhile, I upgraded my own position quietly. My new leadership role at the tech firm gave me leverage I hadn't had before. It wasn't just about money. It was about credibility and reach. I started networking strategically, reconnecting with contacts who could be useful in various capacities. The type of people who could influence opinion quietly but decisively. The type who could apply pressure without needing to be seen as vengeful. I was thinking 5 moves ahead, like a chess game, but I wasn't rushing. Patience was part of the plan. Physically, I continued to build myself. Morning runs became longer, heavier, boxing sessions tougher. My apartment became a base where I could strategize without interference. I even installed some home security upgrades, not just cameras, but data protection, alarms, and redundancies. I knew Megan could be impulsive and manipulative, but if she ever tried to trespass or access my life again, I wanted her to realize instantly that the game had changed. Every small improvement, physically, mentally, technologically, was a reminder that I wasn't the man who could be cornered anymore. Socially, I moved carefully, reconnecting with friends I had lost touch with over the years, the ones who had always truly seen me. I began planting subtle hints, stories about integrity, honesty, and self-respect in casual conversation, without revealing anything personal. This was groundwork. If I ever needed witnesses, support, or public acknowledgement of my side of the story, I wanted a network ready. And, as expected, over time, people began to notice a difference in me. Stronger, sharper, more focused. The quiet man who everyone assumed would bend and break was no longer quiet in the ways that mattered. The next, and perhaps most delicate, part was psychological. Megan thrived on control. If I reacted emotionally, she won. If I showed fear, guilt, or anger, she won. So I practiced restraint. I rehearsed my responses, imagined scenarios, and anticipated how she might manipulate situations to her advantage. Every encounter, every message, every social interaction became an opportunity to observe, to learn, and to refine my approach. By the time I engaged with her again, I wanted every move to be calculated, precise, unassailable. And then came the surveillance. Not the creepy kind, nothing illegal, but I wanted eyes on patterns. When she left the house, how often she went to the boutique, who visited her, what messages she sent publicly, what slips she might make in conversation. I didn't stalk. I collected observable, verifiable information. Every slip she made, every lie she told publicly or privately, became a potential tool. By now, the collection of evidence was immense, far more than she could ever imagine, and I organized it carefully. Emails, screenshots, financial records, witness statements. Everything was cataloged in a secure digital vault. One afternoon, I realized I had something far more powerful than revenge: leverage. Megan had assumed I was passive. Lorraine had assumed I could be guilt-tripped. Paige had assumed I lacked cunning. They didn't know the full extent of what I had. And now, with patience and careful planning, I could control the narrative entirely. Not recklessly, but deliberately. Every move I made from this point forward could be calculated for maximum effect. Impact without risk. I began drafting scenarios. How I would respond if she tried to manipulate mutual friends, if she contacted clients, if her boutique began to collapse publicly. I listed every possible outcome, every reaction and counterreaction. I considered what allies I might need. Former colleagues who could confirm her lies about professional incompetence, mutual friends who had witnessed her manipulation firsthand, even former boutique employees who were quietly disgruntled. I started making discreet contact, careful not to reveal my endgame, just building rapport and subtly gauging their willingness to support the truth. The psychological aspect of my plan was crucial. Megan and her family thrived on arrogance. They believed they could control perception. They assumed everyone would believe her first, accept her narrative, and dismiss mine as the bitter, wronged husband speaking. I had learned over the past months that the best revenge isn't loud or impulsive. It's silent, creeping, methodical. It's about setting the stage so the other person dismantles themselves with their own assumptions. And that was exactly what I planned to do. Meanwhile, I kept my own life moving forward. Work continued, new projects arrived, and I performed with precision, gaining recognition quietly. I cultivated a small circle of trusted confidants who knew parts of the truth, but not the full extent, keeping myself insulated. Every interaction became a test. If someone slipped, said too much, or reacted impulsively, I noted it. I was building a map of influence, of connections, of leverage points I could deploy when the time came. Every day, I checked on the boutique's public profile, discreetly observing Megan's social media, the reactions of clients, the subtle shifts in her business network. I noticed patterns. A client suddenly disengaged after noticing inconsistencies. A former employee started subtly posting complaints about management. A supplier questioned certain financial arrangements. Each small observation was added to my mental ledger. These tiny fractures were proof that the foundation she had relied on for manipulation and control was unstable. And I intended to show her just how unstable it really was. Then, there was the envelope, the initial black envelope that had started all of this. I had never opened it in the presence of anyone else. It had been my private ammunition. I reviewed it again, meticulously, making sure I understood every piece of evidence, every loophole, every vulnerability. I realized that timing would be critical. If I revealed too much too soon, Megan might regroup, manipulate, or discredit my claims. If I waited too long, I risked losing momentum. I needed the perfect moment, when her arrogance, overconfidence, and sense of untouchability were at their peak. And that's when it hit me. The upcoming boutique anniversary event, something Megan had been planning for months, was the perfect setup. It was public, it would be well attended by clients, friends, and even some local media. Megan would be in her element, basking in attention, confident that her public image was untouchable. If I timed it correctly, if I had the right people in place, if every piece of evidence was ready and verifiable, it would be impossible for her to spin the narrative. She would be exposed, publicly and undeniably, and there would be no room for denial. I began drafting the strategy in precise detail. Who needed to be alerted in advance? Who could be relied upon to corroborate the truth? Which documents would be revealed in what order? Every angle, every possible countermeasure she might take, every potential ally she could attempt to sway. I considered it all. This was no longer about emotion. It was about execution. As I prepared, I reflected on how far I'd come. Months ago, I was the quiet, ignored husband, the one everyone assumed would bend and forgive without question. Now, I was deliberate, patient, and precise. I had rebuilt myself physically, emotionally, financially, and professionally. And most importantly, I had reclaimed my power. Megan and her family had treated me as a passive fixture in their lives, someone to manipulate and dismiss. But I was no longer that man. I had transformed the betrayal, the heartbreak, and the humiliation into focus, strategy, and control. And soon, very soon, they would realize that the quiet man they had underestimated for years was not just back. He was unstoppable. The night of the boutique's anniversary event arrived, and I could feel the tension in the air without even stepping inside. Megan had spent weeks planning this showcase, inviting clients, suppliers, and a few local journalists to celebrate her success. She had posted teaser photos, shared videos, and built the illusion that her little boutique was thriving beyond anyone's expectations. In truth, I knew exactly how fragile it was. Every financial mismanagement, every client complaint, every missing invoice. I had documented it all. Every lie she'd told to secure her image was cataloged, verifiable, and ready to be exposed. I arrived early, wearing a tailored suit and carrying nothing but my phone and a small folder containing printouts of the most damning evidence. My plan was simple: precision, patience, and public truth. No yelling, no spectacle, just cold, undeniable facts laid bare. I parked a few blocks away and walked in casually, blending in as just another guest. Megan saw me immediately, her face lighting up with that practiced smile, the one she used for cameras and clients alike. But I noticed the subtle tension under her eyes, the flicker of unease that comes from someone sensing that the ground beneath them isn't as stable as they believe. The event was in full swing. Light music, sparkling glasses, conversations buzzing. Megan circulated, shaking hands, laughing at carefully curated jokes, her energy a show of confidence. I let her work, letting the evening unfold naturally, observing, noting. The first step of the plan was social proof. I discreetly connected with a few former boutique employees and key clients I had contacted weeks earlier. They were all in place, quietly prepared to corroborate my claims if the moment came. Everything had to be seamless, believable, and undeniable. As Megan gave her little speech in front of the gathered crowd, I stayed near the back, calm, collected, watching. She boasted about sales numbers, partnerships, and expansions, but her statements were filled with subtle exaggerations. Numbers inflated, timelines falsified. That was my cue. I approached a few journalists in attendance, handing them copies of verified records, the financial statements, emails with clients showing inconsistencies, documented proof of mismanagement, and even screenshots of her lies about personal investments she claimed were hers alone. I didn't say a word about Megan's infidelity. That was for a different layer of exposure. Here, the goal was credibility, the kind that could not be spun or denied. Soon, whispers began to ripple through the room. I noticed clients exchanging confused glances, some excusing themselves from conversations, others discreetly opening the documents I had handed them. Megan, unaware at first, kept smiling, her confidence still intact. But the flickers of unease grew as I watched her face register each subtle reaction: the raised eyebrows, the tightened lips, the momentary pause in her speech. She could feel the tide turning, though she didn't know why yet. Then came the final layer. I pulled out my phone and discreetly connected to a small projector I had set up under the guise of being a live social media display. As Megan continued speaking, I projected a private slideshow to the screen in the corner of the room, visible to those close enough to glance at it. The images were simple: screenshots, financial records, and short captions highlighting contradictions in her statements, evidence of client complaints, and proof of deceit. The room began to murmur loudly. People leaning in, exchanging puzzled looks, flipping through the documents I had distributed. Megan finally noticed and froze, mid-sentence, her smile faltering. What is this?" she stammered, her voice unsteady. I stepped forward calmly, letting my presence be known. "It's the truth, Megan. Not opinions, not rumors. The truth." Her eyes darted from the projector to me, and then to the clients and journalists. The facade crumbled. She tried to recover, to laugh it off, but every attempt to explain was drowned out by the tangible evidence displayed and corroborated by witnesses in the crowd. Lorraine appeared at her side, her face an awkward mask of concern, but even she seemed unsure how to spin the situation now. Paige, standing near the refreshments table, turned pale as she realized this was not going to be a social media battle she could control with a few cryptic posts. I spoke next, slow, deliberate, calm. "You've built a career and a reputation on lies, manipulation, and deceit. Every client here deserves to know the truth. Every employee who left quietly deserves acknowledgement. And everyone in this room should be aware that the success you claim is built on falsehoods and betrayal." A hush fell over the room. Clients whispered among themselves, journalists snapped notes, and Megan could only stare, powerless, as her entire carefully constructed image collapsed in real time. She opened her mouth to speak, but the evidence, visible, verifiable, undeniable, left her mute. Her control evaporated. Then came the final confirmation. One of the former employees I had brought, a young woman who had been mistreated but feared retaliation, stepped forward. Calmly, professionally, she corroborated every point I had raised. "I was asked to manipulate sales numbers," she said. "I was threatened when I questioned procedures. The boutique's reported profits are not accurate. I am here to confirm that what Mr. Oscar has presented is truthful." The room reacted immediately. Clients murmured in shock, some shaking their heads, others moving away. Journalists clicked cameras and scribbled notes rapidly. Megan's face went from pale to red, then white again as the gravity of the exposure set in. She finally turned to Lorraine, searching for rescue, but Lorraine's expression was frozen. This wasn't something she could spin away. Paige tried to intervene, whispering something harshly, but even her words were drowned out by the reactions of those around her. The narrative had flipped entirely. Megan and her family realized that no amount of charm, manipulation, or misdirection could undo the facts now. They had been outmaneuvered calmly, strategically, and flawlessly. I let the moment breathe. I didn't shout, didn't gloat. I simply observed. The clients who had quietly left before returned with questions for me, validation for the information I presented. Journalists approached with interest, some taking statements, others seeking follow-ups. Megan's colleagues whispered among themselves, casting sympathetic glances toward her, but it was too little, too late. By the end of the night, the boutique's reputation was in tatters. Key clients had withdrawn commitments. Suppliers were reconsidering contracts. The media coverage would be devastating, but truthful. Megan, Lorraine, and Paige stood in the middle of the room, surrounded, humiliated, and powerless. The entire evening had transformed into an undeniable reckoning, orchestrated not through anger, not through yelling, but through meticulous preparation and evidence-based exposure. After the crowd had thinned, I approached the front entrance. Megan finally found her voice, trembling. "Oscar, you can't just do this. You can't." I cut her off, calmly, without raising my voice. "I didn't do anything. I simply showed the truth. You did this to yourself." Lorraine tried to intervene, but I looked at her and said, "Your lessons, your favoritism, your manipulation, they failed tonight. It's not about revenge anymore. It's about accountability." Paige's face was red with anger, her mouth open, but no words came. I turned, walking out into the cool night, feeling the weight of months of strategy, patience, and self-rebuilding lift slightly. The streets were empty, but inside, I felt a rush, not of vindictive satisfaction, but of liberation. The house I had lost sleep planning for, the months of meticulous preparation, the patience and restraint, it had all culminated in a single night where justice, calm and undeniable, was served. By the time I reached my car, I felt a strange sense of closure. Megan, her mother, and her sister would have to face the fallout of their choices, publicly and privately. They had built their world on deceit and manipulation, but I had taken the tools of evidence, patience, and precision to dismantle it entirely. They were no longer untouchable, no longer capable of controlling perception or punishing me for being honest and steady. I started the car, driving away from the boutique, from the night of reckoning, and from the people who had once made me feel small, powerless, and invisible. For the first time in years, I felt like myself again, truly free, grounded, and capable of building a life without manipulation, without lies, and without fear. And as I drove, I couldn't help but smile faintly to myself, thinking, quietly but firmly, this is what real power looks like. The quiet man who everyone underestimated had won. The truth had spoken, and I was finally, irreversibly, free.